The cinema and video games industry have many similarities. Some see the game as a newer and more complete form of film that allows the audience to be more immersed in the director's desired atmosphere. Others see the film as superior and can't communicate the same with graphic scenes as they do with real scenes and humans. Some also believe that with the advancement of technology and the release of more powerful graphics engines, the boundary between the two industries has gradually dimmed, and with the release of interactive films on the one hand and the launch of cinematic games on the other hand, the two worlds are more integrated. The resemblance of the two industries to each other has led many who are active in the video game industry to be interested in making video games adapted from movies. Of course, in recent years, we see that the opposite is true, and many directors are interested in making movies or series from video games. Although this on paper seems like a fascinating idea, unfortunately, as we've seen many times, these adapted products are usually hopeless and can't keep fans satisfied. It seems that even with the great resemblance of these two industries to each other, there are still fundamental differences in the process of making them, which makes adapted products not as attractive as they should be and perhaps not. In this video, we take a short look at the reasons why the games adapted from the movies failed. Of course, when we say failure, we definitely don't mean all adapted games. Games such as Alien Isolation, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order or Middle-earth Shadow of War are all among the games adapted from movies and are all powerful and high-quality games in their own style. But most of the games adapted from movies have usually had superficial, forgettable and hopeless effects. The first and most important reason that adapted games usually turn into disappointing products is the commerciality of these games. Being commercial means that most of these games are made for creators only in order to make more money, and there is no creative thought behind them. This minimizes the focus of the creators on the creative process of making the game, and the profitability part of the story becomes more important. On the other hand, most adapted games are released in a period close to the time of the film's release. In fact, the game is used as a means of selling as many movies as possible. The popularity of the film also ensures the sale of the game in some way and makes it easier to attract audiences. However, normally, creators do their best to attract audiences of diverse tastes and sell more with gameplay design and innovative stages. This is not only in the field of video games, but also in many other branches of art. When the sale of an art product, or even non-artistic, is guaranteed, the idea about that product loses its value and leads to a decrease in the quality of that product. For example, a title like Fast and Furious Crossroads, an adaptation game based on a very popular franchise film and received many negative reviews. The average score of this title is about 35, which by any measure is considered a poor game. But when we put the game's sales figures alongside its own category game sales figures, we see Crossroads has had relatively good sales. Of course, these statistics are still below the creator's expectations, but the reason a game with this volume of problems can sell relatively well is just one thing: the credibility of the film it was adapted from. Another factor that makes most games adapted from movies a medium or poor product is time limits and intensive deadlines. Normally creators can, if needed, set a new date for their game released and solve as many game problems as possible and bring a more polished product into the market. Of course, delaying the release of a game in any case is a detrimental act, and the creators avoid it as much as possible, but I think we all agree that waiting for a full game is better than the early experience of a flawed game. Also, manufacturers can normally adjust the release date to the time they need to build their game. For example, the Grand Theft Auto collection. The fifth version of the series was released in 2013 and now it's been about 9 years since the game was released, and all we know about the sixth version is that the game is under construction. The creators have spent all this time building the game and fixing its flaws, and except for the deadlines and the time limits of the company itself, there is no other factor that emphasizes the release of the game as quickly as possible, if we ignore the pressure from gamers to the company. In the case of adapted games, the theorem is slightly different. Most of these games are produced in a short time, and any delay in the release of these titles will have heavy consequences. The reason is the same one I mentioned in the previous section. Most of these games actually have a promotional aspect and should be released at a time close to the release of the relevant film. Naturally, more limited time means higher work pressure and stress. Needless to say, the higher the work stress of the company's employees, the lower their efficiency and the result will be a superficial product full of problems. In addition, the time limit allows manufacturers to fix as many game shortcomings as possible and provide a more complete product to the market. GoldenEye 007 was a title released about 2 years after the release of his film and received many positive reviews. The game was delayed even a few times, And ultimately what was achieved by the audience was a polished and complete product. Alien Isolation had a similar situation, and the creators had enough time to build the game. Both games not only fit into the list of best adapted games from films, but are not just a commercial product. These two games, and a few other titles, were able to share with the audience what is expected of a video game and keep them satisfied. So when it comes to building a game, time definitely plays a direct role in its success. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the gaming and film industry bears many similarities. In fact, many of the filming, storytelling and characterization techniques used in the gaming industry today are modeled on the cinema industry. On the other hand, with the growth of the gaming industry, we are clearly seeing that cinema directors are also interested in modeling elements in video games. In the last few years, we've seen several video game adaptations that Uncharted and Resident Evil are just examples of these titles. But no matter how similar these two industries are, there are many differences that make them two separate categories. In making most of the adapted games from movies, this is usually ignored, and the end result is neither a full film nor a complete game. To build a game, you need a creative gameplay first of all. Even games with great stories fail without a creative gameplay that immerses the audience in the flows of the game. In addition, the time of most films is between 2 and 3 hours. However, a 2 to 3 hour game is too short, and most story-driven games on the market have gameplay at least 2 to 3 times that amount. Naturally, filling this extra time requires strong ideas, and it is not possible to re-narrate the story of the film and send the game made of it to the market. However, the same thing usually happens and leads to failure. Another issue is the difference between characterization in the game and the film. In video games, you usually fall into the role of protagonists, while you watch the film from a third-person perspective and only witness the main character's decisions and actions. In the game, it's you who decides. So the way you communicate with movie and game characters is greatly different. Also, because the actors of a film are real human beings, the director may not need to make a double attempt to show the characters. While the director of a game carries the task of making his characters look as real as possible so that the audience can communicate with them, at least in games where characters must look real, there are small and coarse gaps between the two industries, which are usually close-ups by the manufacturers of adapted products. If more attention is paid to these gaps and the requirements of each industry are taken into account, we will see better adapted products. In the end, as always, I want to know your opinion as well. Do you also agree that most of the games adapted from movies are medium and poor products? If your answer is yes, what do you think are the other reasons for this? How do you look at this? I'm waiting for you in the comments section.